Life doesn't pull its punches. It's not a movie where the music swells and things work out just because you're the main character. Most of the time, life feels like a heavy weight pressing down on your chest, waiting for you to gasp so it can press harder. You lose the person who promised to stay. The bank account hits zero. Or you realize the dream you've been chasing for a decade is actually a nightmare. This is where most people break. They cry out that it's unfair. They wait for a rescue team that isn't coming. They think happiness is a right they were cheated out of. Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher who didn't care about making you feel warm and fuzzy, dropped a truth bomb. Life is a business that doesn't cover its costs. Think about that. Most people are working overtime to pay for a life that gives them nothing but stress in return. He looked at the world and saw that suffering isn't an accident. It's the baseline. It's the factory setting. We are born with an internal will, a blind, restless hunger that forces us to want, to strive, to grab, and to keep going even when it hurts. Imagine you're grinding at a job where the manager treats you like a ghost and the pay barely covers the gas to get there. You're exhausted, your back aches, and you're filled with a simmering resentment. The problem you think you have is the job or the boss. But the real problem, the one breaking you, is the belief that you deserve for this to be easy. You are suffering because your will is screaming for a comfort that doesn't exist in the material world. You're waiting for the world to stop being heavy so you can finally feel light. To get out of this mental trap, you have to stop negotiating with reality. You stop asking, why is this happening? And start acknowledging this is what is. Schopenhauer taught that the only way to win is to stop playing the game of constant desire. You train your mind to be unbreakable by lowering your expectations of the world to absolute zero. When you expect the world to be a vale of tears rather than a playground, the hits don't hurt as much. You don't get broken by a breakup or a layoff because you already knew the world was unstable. Think of a boxer. A novice gets hit and gets angry or shocked. He loses his form and gets knocked out. A pro expects to get hit. He knows the punch is coming. Because he accepts the pain as part of the contract, he stays calm, keeps his guard up, and stays on his feet. You solve the crisis of a breaking life by shifting your perspective from victim to observer. When you're in that moment where everything is going wrong, the car won't start, the rent is late, and you're lonely, don't try to manifest a better day. Instead, look at the chaos and say, of course it's like this. This is the nature of existence. By stripping away the shock, you strip away the power the event has over your emotions. You become the mountain that the storm hits. The storm is loud, it's wet, and it's violent. But the mountain doesn't move because it doesn't expect the sun to shine every day. You build this unbreakable mindset by realizing that your internal peace is the only thing you actually own. The job, the money, the status, those are just borrowed items the world can take back at any second. If you tie your strength to those things, you will break every time. But if you tie your strength to your ability to endure the will and remain detached, you become a fortress. You solve the problem of a broken life by realizing that while you can't control the hammer, you can decide to be the anvil. The anvil doesn't complain when it gets struck. It just stays solid until the hammer eventually wears out. That is how you survive. That is how you become someone that life cannot crush. You stop looking for an exit and start building an interior life that is so deep and so grounded that the surface-level storms can't reach the bottom. Most of us are living like we're chasing a ghost. We think that if we just get that one thing, the better car, the bigger paycheck, the person who makes everyone else jealous, we'll finally arrive at a place called happy. We treat happiness like a destination, a finish line where we can finally sit down and breathe. But Schopenhauer saw right through this. He called out the illusion of happiness for what it really is, a trick played on us by our own biology. He compared our desires to the alms thrown to a beggar, which keeps him alive today, only so his misery can be prolonged, until tomorrow. Think about the last time you really, really wanted something. Maybe it was a new pair of shoes, a promotion, or even just a text back from someone you like. You spent days or weeks obsessing over it. Your brain told you, if I get this, I'm good. The hunger will stop. Then you got it. You felt that hit of dopamine, that rush, for maybe an hour or a day, if you're lucky. But what happened next? The high faded, and suddenly you were looking for the next thing. You weren't satisfied. You were just bored. Schopenhauer described our lives as a pendulum swinging back and forth between pain and boredom. When we don't have what we want, we suffer from the pain of wanting. When we finally get what we want, we suffer from the boredom of having it. It's a rigged game. You're either hungry and miserable or full and bored. The problem isn't that you haven't found the right thing to make you happy. The problem is the want itself. This constant itchy urge to strive is what breaks you, because it makes your peace of mind dependent on things you can't always control. Imagine a situation where you finally move into a nicer apartment. For the first week, you're proud. You look at the floors and the view, and you feel like a winner. But by month 2, the view is just a window, and the floors are just something you have to vacuum. Suddenly, you start noticing that your neighbor has a balcony, and you don't. Now the apartment that was supposed to be your happiness is the source of your frustration. You're back on the pendulum. The problem isn't the balcony. It's the fact that your mind is programmed to never stay satisfied. To get out of this loop and build a mind that is unbreakable, you have to stop trying to win the game and start walking away from the table. You solve this by practicing what Schopenhauer called the denial of the will. This doesn't mean you go live in a cave. It means you stop believing the lie that the next win is going to fix you. You start looking at your desires like they are annoying telemarketers calling your phone. You hear the ring, you know they're there, but you don't pick up. When you feel that desperate need to buy something to feel better, or that urge to scroll social media to see how many people liked your photo, you stop. You sit with the boredom. You realize that boredom is actually a position of power. If you can be bored and not lose your mind, you are a king. You become unbreakable because you've killed the need. The secret to a strong mind is realizing that happiness isn't a plus you add to your life. It's the minus of suffering. It's the temporary quiet when the will stops screaming for a second. By realizing that the shiny things life dangles in front of you are just illusions, you stop being a slave to them. When life breaks you by taking something away, your money, your status, your stuff, it doesn't actually hurt you, because you already knew those things were just temporary distractions anyway. You find your strength in the realization that you have everything you need right now, simply by refusing to want more. You trade the illusion of happiness for the reality of peace. That peace can't be stolen, and it can't be broken, because it doesn't rely on the world giving you anything. It relies on you being enough for yourself. When things go wrong, our first instinct is to take it personally. We feel like the universe has a grudge against us. We get angry at the guy who scammed us, the partner who lied, or the boss who fired us. We carry that anger around like a hot coal, hoping to throw it at them, but we're the ones getting burned. Schopenhauer had a very different way of looking at this. He said we should look at every person we meet, not as an enemy, but as a fellow sufferer. He believed that everyone is being driven by the same blind, desperate will that causes nothing but trouble. Think about a situation where you're stuck in a toxic workplace. You have a supervisor who is constantly breathing down your neck, picking apart your work, and making your life a living hell. The problem is that you're letting their bitterness poison your own mind. You go home and vent for 3 hours. You can't sleep because you're playing back the insults, and you wake up dreading the day. You are being broken by someone else's dysfunction. You feel like a victim of their malice. To get out of this, you have to change the way you see the enemy. Schopenhauer suggested that instead of hate, we should feel a sort of grim pity for people. That boss isn't a powerful villain. They are a person trapped in their own cycle of stress, fear, and ego. They are suffering just as much as you are, even if it looks like they're on top. When you realize that their attacks are just a reflection of their own internal war, the sting goes away. You solve the problem by detaching your worth from their words. You look at them the way you'd look at a barking dog. You don't get offended by a dog barking because that's just what dogs do. This is how you turn suffering into strength. You use the pain as a whetstone to sharpen your character. Schopenhauer used the example of a ship that needs ballast, heavy weights in the hull, to keep from flipping over in the waves. Without some level of trouble, worry, and labor, we would become shallow and drift away. The suffering is the weight that keeps you upright when the winds of life start howling. Imagine you're going through a brutal breakup. It feels like your heart has been put through a paper shredder. You can't eat, you can't think, and you feel weak. Most people try to numb the pain with distractions or new relationships, but that just makes the foundation weaker. To solve this, you lean into the suffering. You acknowledge that to live is to suffer, and you stop fighting the feeling. You use the solitude to understand who you are when nobody is looking. You realize that if you can sit in the middle of that emotional wreckage and still keep your head up, you have become something much more dangerous to the world, a person who cannot be intimidated by loss. You stop seeing your scars as defects and start seeing them as armor. Every time life tries to break you and fails, your mind muscle gets a micro tear and grows back thicker. You become unbreakable by accepting that the friction of life is exactly what builds the heat needed to forge a strong soul. When someone treats you like dirt, you don't lower yourself to their level to fight back. You stay calm. Your silence becomes your shield. Your ability to remain unmoved while everyone else is losing their cool is the ultimate flex. You solve the crisis of suffering by realizing it is a teacher, not a punisher. It's teaching you that the external world is a mess and that your only true safety is inside your own mind. By the time you've been through enough bad days, you develop a sort of internal iron. You become the person who can walk through a storm and not get wet, not because the rain stopped, but because you realized you are the mountain and the rain is just weather. You take the energy that used to go into complaining and you put it into your own self-mastery. That is how you win. You don't get strong by avoiding the weight. You get strong by lifting it until it feels light. Most people are terrified of their own heads. They need constant noise, music, TV, gossip, or the glow of a screen to drown out the silence. Schopenhauer famously said that a person who doesn't love being alone doesn't love freedom. Think about that. When you are in a crowd, you are a copy of a copy. You say things you don't mean, laugh at jokes that aren't funny, and care about trends you actually hate just to fit in. You are broken because you are fragmented into 1,000 pieces to please 1,000 different people. You've become a mirror, reflecting everyone else's junk instead of being your own person. Think about a time you stayed at a loud, draining party or stayed in a toxic relationship long after you wanted to leave, just because you were scared of going home to an empty house. You felt that hollow ache in your chest at the thought of a Friday night with nothing but the sound of the refrigerator humming. You traded your integrity and your energy for presence just to have a warm body nearby. The problem here is a total lack of self-sufficiency. You've become a beggar for attention, and beggars are never strong. If your happiness requires an audience, you are a slave to whoever shows up. You solve this by realizing that solitude is the only place where you can actually find your own rhythm. You have to stop treating your mind like a public park where anyone can walk through and leave their trash, and start treating it like a fortress. Schopenhauer believed that the more a man has in himself, the less he will want from other people. You start small. You eat a meal without looking at your phone. You take a walk without headphones. At first, it feels itchy and uncomfortable. That's the will trying to trick you into seeking a distraction. But if you sit through it, the itch goes away and a weird kind of power takes its place. Imagine you've just been ghosted or excluded from a group chat you used to be part of. The old you would feel small, rejected, and desperate to get back in. You'd spend hours wondering what you did wrong. The unbreakable you sees this as a gift of time. You solve the sting of rejection by realizing that most people are just noise anyway. You use that extra time to read, to build a skill, or to simply think deeply about your own life. You realize that being alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness is failing to be a good companion to yourself. Solitude is the victory of being enough. When you become your own best company, you become dangerous to the system. You can't be bought with likes, you can't be manipulated by the fear of being left out, and you can't be threatened with cancellation. Why? Because you don't need anyone else to tell you that you exist or that you're valid. You've built a world inside your own skull that is more interesting, more stable, and more honest than the circus outside. You become unbreakable because your foundation is built on the only thing that stays with you from the day you're born to the day you die: your own consciousness. You stop running from the quiet and start using it as a laboratory to forge a soul that doesn't crack under pressure. When the world eventually walks away, and it will, because everything in this life is temporary, you won't be left with nothing. You'll be left with yourself. And if you've done the work, that will be more than enough. You don't just survive the silence, you own it. That is the ultimate secret of the unbreakable mind, finding a peace that the world didn't give you, and therefore the world cannot take away. Let's be real. There are mornings when all this talk about unbreakable mindsets feels like a total load of garbage. You wake up, and the world feels grey. Your chest is heavy, your brain is foggy, and you have zero desire to be a fortress or a mountain. You're just not in the mood. You feel defeated before you even put your feet on the floor. Schopenhauer understood this better than anyone. He knew that our emotions are like the weather, unpredictable, often gloomy, and completely out of our control. He taught that the will inside us is a moody tyrant that throws a tantrum whenever it doesn't get its way. The biggest mistake you can make is believing that you need to feel like a warrior to act like one. Think about a Tuesday morning where everything feels pointless. You had a plan to work out, read something deep, or finally start that project, but your mood is telling you to just crawl back under the covers and doom scroll for 3 hours. You feel down, so you tell yourself, I'll start when I'm motivated. This is the trap. The problem isn't your sadness or your lack of energy. The problem is the belief that your feelings should be the boss of your actions. By waiting for a good mood to show up, you are giving away your power to a chemical dip in your brain. You are letting a temporary cloud define your permanent character. To get out of this slump, you have to stop negotiating with your emotions. You solve this by practicing what Schopenhauer called asceticism in small, street-level doses. This isn't about hurting yourself. It's about the art of doing exactly what you don't want to do, simply because you decided to do it. You separate your action from your feeling. Think of your body like a car, and your mind like the driver. If the driver is crying, the car can still drive. You don't need to want to go for that walk. You just need to move your legs. You don't need to feel inspired to write that page. You just need to move your fingers. Imagine you're in a deep funk after a rejection or a failure. Your mind is screaming that you're a loser, and there's no point in trying. The unbreakable move isn't to try and think positive or shout affirmations in the mirror. That's just lying to yourself, and your brain knows it. Instead, you look at that negative thought and say, "Okay, I hear you. Now watch me do this anyway." You solve the heaviness by taking small, mechanical victories. You wash the dishes. You fold the laundry. You show up to the gym even if you just sit on the bench for 10 minutes. By acting while you feel like garbage, you are training your mind at a much higher level than when things are easy. Schopenhauer believed that life is a struggle, and the only way to win is to stop expecting it to be comfortable. Strength isn't found in the sunshine. It's forged in the cold, dark corners of your worst days. When you act despite your mood, you break the chains that your emotions have over your life. You stop being a leaf blown by the wind and start being the wind itself. You realize that your mood is just a guest in your house, but you are the owner. You don't let a guest tell you how to run the place. This is how you keep the plan alive when you're down. You lower the bar for how you do things, but you never lower the bar for that you do them. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But don't you dare sit still and wait for motivation to save you. Motivation is a fair-weather friend who disappears the second things get tough. Discipline is the partner who stays when the lights go out. You become unbreakable not by being happy all the time, but by being the person who keeps moving even when they're miserable. That is the ultimate flex over the will. You prove that your spirit is stronger than your biology. You aren't just surviving the bad mood. You are using it as a weight to build a soul that nothing can crush. If you're tired of being a slave to your moods, hit that subscribe button and tell me, what's one thing you're going to do today, specifically because you don't want to do it? Let's start breaking the power of the will together. Like the video if this gave you the reality check you needed, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay solid.